Unity and support, two things Iran's president-elect is calling for after his victory was announced just hours ago. Reformist Masoud Pezeshkian beat ultra-conservative Saeed Jalili by almost 3 million votes. Pezeshkian was the only moderate candidate allowed to run after Iran's Guardian Council banned dozens of others from even entering the race. The election was held after a helicopter crash that killed previous President Ebrahim Raisi in May. Russian and Saudi leaders have congratulated Pezeshkian on his victory. For more now, we've got Fred Pleiken joining us from Berlin. Fred, good to see you. So the results are in. The big question is, what is Pezeshkian going to do from a policy perspective, the first moves, and how much power he'll ultimately have in a country that I guess has a lot of hardliners that could potentially block him, especially if he's looking at enacting social changes.
Yeah, a lot of hardliners and, of course, also a lot of pretty hardline entities as well that could block a lot of his policies should they go down a road that they don't want to go down. You're absolutely right. Those are definitely decisive questions. But first of all, of course, I think one of the things that is pretty surprising to a lot of people is how decisive the victory for Masoud Pezeshkian has been. He certainly managed to get a lot more votes than Saeed Jalili, the conservative candidate. One of the things, of course, that we were looking at before the second round of the election took place is that in the first round, Pezeshkian also managed to get most of the votes, but if we took the total of the 6 candidates who were in that race at that point, then more people certainly voted conservative than voted moderate. One of the other interesting things that I also think that we need to be looking at is the fact that the voter turnout was a lot higher than it was in the first round of the election. It was at around 40%. Now it's at around 50%. Yet it is still quite low for presidential elections in Iran. And yet the moderates managed to get more vote. That's something that's pretty unusual. Usually we think that when the voter turnout is low, that the conservatives tend to get a better result. Nevertheless, Masoud Pezeshkian is now the president-elect. And one of the things, of course, that he wants is better relations with countries in the region and better relations with the West as well. And he wants all Iranians to latch onto that. He put out a pretty interesting tweet. I want to read to you some of it. He said, "Dear people of Iran, the elections are over, and this is just the beginning of our support/work. The difficult path ahead of us all will not be paved except with your support, empathy, and trust. I extend my hand to you and swear my dignity." So he certainly is thanking his supporters, but also trying to get those who did not vote for him on board as well. But you're absolutely right. The president in Iran does have a considerable amount of power, but of course all of that power rests within the system of the Islamic Republic, where of course anything that happens there needs to be signed off on by the supreme leader and of course by the strong military entities like, for instance, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as well, Eleni.
Yeah, it sounds very bureaucratic. Fred, give us a sense of the international reaction to this. I think that everyone's watching on, seeing a moderate candidate winning the election, and they're wondering, whether he'll be able to create change on the foreign policy front.
You know what, and I think one of the interesting things about that as well is, of course, right now, Iran really has a huge role if you look at the Middle East, but not just yet. For instance, Iranian relations with Russia, with Vladimir Putin, have really peaked over the last couple of months. Iran is very important to Russia and, of course, also to Vladimir Putin's war efforts in Ukraine as well. So certainly a lot of countries are looking at this, and I think it's quite interesting to see who has congratulated Masoud Pezeshkian already. One of the first ones being Vladimir Putin, who once again said that he hoped to expand relations with Russia. You also had Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia as well. That, of course, also is going to be very interesting to see how relations between those two countries develop. We have seen a bit of a détente recently between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That was something that also happened under the Raisi government, and certainly something where we expect that might continue as well. We haven't yet heard much of is in the way of Western reactions to this. Western leaders possibly congratulating Pezeshkian as well. But definitely right now, with all the turmoil that's going on in the Middle East, with all the turmoil that's going on in Europe as well, with the war going on in Ukraine, it's going to be very interesting to see where the chips fall. On the foreign policy front,
absolutely,
though, the president has a lot less power to try and exact any change there. So we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out, Eleni.
Yeah, it's so important, just like what kind of relationship the world can have with Iran's new president and how much power he actually has. Very quickly on him being very vocal around Mahsa Amini's death. Something that's very close to what Iran's voters are feeling right now, their ability to have freedoms, especially for women. Anything that you're hearing on that front, Fred?
Well, certainly. First of all, you're absolutely right. He was very vocal on that. He said that the authorities needed to take responsibility for all the things that happened there. He, in fact, himself said that he believed that he was also to blame as someone who's is a prominent figure in Iran as well, and that in general he felt that the crackdown that followed that was way too hard. That's going to be a very, very interesting thing to watch in Iran as well. In fact, recently we have had the supreme leader, for instance, double down on the very strict hijab laws and saying that they needed to be enforced by everybody in society. But we know that Masoud Pezeshkian takes a very different path in that as well. That's going to be one of the ones that we're definitely going to watch, and certainly something that does seem to be very important also for at least the moderate voters, at least from what we saw. We did go to one Pezeshkian rally before he was elected, and that was definitely one of the things that was certainly on the minds of the voters there, Leni.
All right. Fred Plankin, always great to speak to you. Thank you.
I want to bring in CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger to discuss even more on this. David, good morning. The world is closely watching President-elect Masoud Pezeshkian to see if he will bring Iran out of increasing international isolation. Fred was just talking about this. Do you think this is even possible or likely?
Well, it's possible, but I think it's going to be difficult. Mr. Pezeshkian, when he ran, was supported, interestingly enough, by some of the former government officials who had negotiated the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, including the foreign minister, former foreign minister of Iran, who was sort of the author of it. So what you've seen now is sort of a movement by the voters to say we want to end the isolation. It's not clear, as Fred pointed out, that the president of Iran has the power to go do that. But the very fact that a government that constricts the vote, it doesn't decide the vote, but it limits who can run, allowed him to basically take the lead here, tells you that there's a recognition they've got to let off some of the anger that has been built up inside Iran toward the existing government. And the opponent, Mr. Jalili, who had been an earlier nuclear negotiator, was a true hardliner.